October 14th, 2024, 6 p.m. in the Council Chambers, 111 East Maple Avenue. Councilmember McCandless has asked for a moment of personal privilege, so Councilmember McCandless, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is my privilege to welcome Henry Becker, who is a student at Rockhurst High School. He is taking his U.S. government class and needs to come and observe a governmental body in action, so we are delighted to welcome Henry. So thank you for coming. I'm sure you'll learn all kinds of things. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, this brings us to the review of the city code on the sale and discharge of fireworks. Mr. City Manager, do you have anything you'd like to kick off for us? Get to start on this one?
I'm going to go ahead and ask Deputy Chief Kirk Stobart to come forward to get ready to present, but as he's making his way forward, just a reminder for the council, after this last 4th of July season, the council asked for a presentation to review city codes, talk about what's allowed, not allowed, et cetera. So Deputy Chief Stobart is here tonight in response to that request, and he will be happy to stand for any questions that you have after the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. We were asked to review or provide a report to you all about fireworks, whether or not they should be prohibited in the City of Independence. This is an interesting topic. I know my 50-plus years of being a resident of Independence, this subject has gone back and forth over the years. I remember back in the day when I was a kid, my dad would bring home a bag full of fireworks and Mom would yell at him because they weren't allowed in Independence, and then I would just go off and set them off anyway. So, all right, so right now fireworks are allowed in Independence. They're allowed to set them off. They're allowed to sell in Independence. Currently, we allow 16 fireworks stands a year. Sales allowed for about a week and a half towards the end of June through July 5th. Each of the tents pay a permit fee of $400 each, generating about $6,400 in permit fees to the City of Independence. Each tent does require a fire safety inspection prior to selling and every day that they're open for sales. So we have staffing that goes through each one of the tents every single day. Comes out to about 208 visits by the Independence Fire Department personnel through the sale period. And we, of course, they have to be there on the 4th of July weekend, so on and so forth. So these tents are a pretty big target for robbery and theft, as you can imagine. There's a lot of people that like to set off fireworks. So we also put together some numbers on firework-related calls. I will say, as I present these numbers, they're probably a little bit higher than what we're reporting. There's not really a specific line item in our report management software, so we ask our crews if they run a firework-related incident to email that in. Sometimes they don't always know. So if a dumpster fire comes along and we had no idea that there were fireworks put in it, then we don't know that that's what really caused it. Same thing with the injuries. These are just the 911 calls that we get. So if somebody does have a firework-related injury and it goes to an urgent care or the hospital, we wouldn't know about it. So we had between 2019 and 2024, we had 24 firework-related calls reported. 5 of those were medical, 19 were fire responses. This slide here, I will, full disclosure, these images are not from any of our calls. These are just for illustration of what could possibly happen with a firework explosion in hand. But the ones that we ran were trauma due to explosion. 4 of them were traumatic hand injuries. 1 of them was a traumatic foot injury. And each trauma resulted in irreparable damage to the affected part, whether it be a scar or other significant damage. The fireworks-related calls are, we had 1 grass fire, 11 trash or dumpster fires, 2 vehicle fires, 1 miscellaneous fire involving appliances in the street, and 4 building fires related to fireworks. This one here was our most significant fire, was on July 4th, 2022 at the Cedar Brook Apartments. This fire is originated in a dumpster next to a carport. The wind, dry conditions carried that fire across the carport, ignited vehicles, and caught the apartment building on fire, which ended up displacing 12 families and causing a little over $200,000 in damage, total damage. As you can see here, these were the fireworks that were disposed of in the dumpster, and like I said, it was adjacent to the carport. In review, fireworks does generate a lot of citizen complaints. As far as permit fees, $6,400 is a chunk of change, but not that big of a chunk of change. Overtime costs, work hours are kind of a wash with that revenue that comes in. There have been, not here in Independence recently, but there have been and can be some life-altering injuries, and hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage, property loss, and targets for theft. Should they be banned in sales? That is a decision for you all up there. That's why you guys get paid the big bucks to make these kind of decisions. One of the things that really needs to be considered too is the ability to enforce. This has been a challenge, I know, for our police department for many, many years. Even when they were not allowed, the enforcement to keep people from doing it, they would just go buy fireworks outside of town and come back in, and let them off. So, do the citizens benefit from the sale and use of fireworks? Financially, permit-wise, not much, a little bit, but there it is. There's my report. I'm open to any questions you might have.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Please proceed.
So I know that these tents are operated by lots of nonprofits, and they actually, in some cases, make the majority of their funds from the tents. So I think there's a financial benefit beyond what comes to the city. I'm going to guess they don't pay any sales tax on that because they're not profits.
No, that's not right.
Oh, okay.
That's not correct. Yes, they do pay sales tax for whatever we receive, we pay sales tax to the state of Missouri for that.
And he runs one of these tents, so as a Boy Scout leader, they benefit from that. When you do inspections, is there any material that goes out to the purchaser? So a piece of paper saying, these are the rules in Independence. Fireworks can only be let off on these dates from these hours, and these are the penalties.
I don't believe there is any information flyers.
Yes, there is.
I haven't been in a fireworks tent in many, many years. So.
I can tell you that yes, there is. In
Okay.
fact, when they come and inspect, and we open the inspection, we get a packet of brochures, and we set them out there, and we try to give them out as much as possible. But every tent I know gets a supply of these brochures that says you can only set them off in these hours, you can only set them off on these days. But the problem is that nobody abides by that. I mean, that I think, well, that's a whole different discussion.
Very good. Anything else?
Can someone remind me what our laws are in Independence with hours and days?
I believe 10 o'clock is a cutoff.
I think it's
Could be wrong, but they can only be let off between July 23rd and June 23rd and July 5th, I believe are the
They can be
timelines.
purchased June 23rd to July 5th. They're supposed to only be set off from, I believe it's July 2nd through 5th, or maybe 3rd through 5th. It's like a much shorter time frame that they're supposed to legally be set off, but the 3, 4, and 5, yeah. So and that's we've got signs up that say that, and all kinds of stuff. So good
3,
question.
4, and 5.
So, we get a lot of questions from people with stressed out pets, families who have people who have served in war for whom this is very triggering, and older folks for whom this disturbs their sleep and really distressing. do you know, how have other communities enforced that? Are they just better behaved, or do they send their police out to enforce it? Or one other option would be to shorten the sale period. So if the sale period is only June 28th through July 5th, that will trim 4 days off the beginning of the explosion season.
I know on the fire side, every community has the same kind of challenges, whether they have rules in place or whether they don't. I don't know if the rules definitely help, but if our current rules, if they were followed, probably wouldn't be as big of an issue. But it's the 2 a.m. fireworks going off. And these are, like I said, to enforce these rules, I think Chief Dustman could probably let you know that is very difficult to enforce that sort of thing. Fireworks are perfectly safe if they're handled and treated properly, but they still catch houses on fire. They still catch, buildings on fire and cause damage to people. So,
Do we have any limits, Mr. City Manager, on the concussives? So are we able to limit things that explode with gigantic noise?
There are limits on the type of firework that can be sold. I don't have that in front of me specifically right now. I will tell you, back in roughly 2017 or 18, the city council at that time did increase the threshold of the concussives so that more powerful explosives could be sold, but there is still a cap of items that are restricted.
I'd like to re-examine that. It seems like more people are really enjoying the window rattling approach to their fireworks, and see if we can get something a little more sensible. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr.
Please
Mayor.
proceed.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Stewart, please proceed.
thank you, Deputy Chief, for that presentation. What fireworks, I know, are bottle rockets banned in Independence? And if there's anything else it is as well?
I don't believe they are.
Okay, I thought they were. I was just curious if they were banned. Okay. My only comment is I think I don't like the fireworks like a lot of people, that go on until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. My biggest concern, if we start limiting it even more, is even just stop the sale period, that they would just bring it in from out of town. Kansas City, I believe they still ban fireworks. People don't follow that ordinance. I think we just need to let them shoot them and get it out of their system, and eventually it'll be over with. Especially when the police are so backlogged on the calls they are as now. If we start giving them even more, it's going to take longer to get there. The response time won't be good, and I just think it would be kind of a bad look for that. So my opinion is we just kind of leave it as it is. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Please proceed.
I can add maybe a few things here, in that being the first starters so I did a little back of the napkin math today, and I came up with, I think that our nonprofits and independents probably net somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000 each year on the sale of fireworks. So it's not insignificant for those nonprofits in any way, shape, or form. It adds a lot to their revenue stream. A couple other things. I do agree with the idea that in the event that we did not allow fireworks to be sold in Independence, that they would just go elsewhere and bring them here. And the selling of them and the shooting of them are two completely separate things in a lot of ways. I'm not sure how you enforce, the code that we have now, given that it's just so difficult to enforce. I do know that some communities have gone to a shorter selling period. I'm not sure I'm not sure if it's Blue Springs, but there are some other communities around that have a slightly shorter selling period than we do, but it's not substantial. I've talked to a couple of other providers in other communities, and they said, yeah, they have a shorter period, but not a lot shorter. And so, I'm kind of the opinion that not selling them really is not going to help much on the issues that we face with them. I mean, one of the things that we face is that people take regular, normal fireworks and they manufacture their own fireworks from those, and that's part of the big noises that you hear, I think, and because we don't sell anything. I heard one just the other night after the Chiefs game that was way louder than anything we sell, at least in our tent. So I'm not sure how we control or can deal with that. I recognize the problem. I'm just not sure that there are any great solutions. And so I'm looking at Chief Zussman, and he's shaking his head as well. So I wish there was better solutions. I'm just not sure what they are.
And I certainly don't want the police to be out having to run fireworks complaint calls, because that's not good for anybody. And we don't have the staff to do that. But I just wonder if there's some common sense modifications that we can make that just make it a little less intense for you and a little intense for the neighborhoods. So thank you. We'll keep thinking about this.
Anyone else, other comments, questions? Deputy Chief, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
And are there any citizens' comments on this discussion? No citizens' comments? Okay, so that brings us to our public transit recommendations. So, Mr. City Manager, please proceed.
Yes, and again, I'll ask Community Development Director Tom Scannell to come forward, but as he is doing so, as the council knows, public transit has been a conversation for the last several years. The city faces a significant subsidy that we pay, as you're going to see in this presentation tonight. We were able to delay this conversation for several years, in part due to the COVID relief funds that was provided to the city through the Kansas City Area Transportation Authority, but those have since dried up, and here we are now with the decision. So city staff have spent the last several months working to identify solutions that meet the needs of our community as best we can within the financial parameters that we've got, and Mr. Scannell is here to share that recommendation with you this evening.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Kind of first talk about kind of the current transit services that we offer. We have fixed route, intercity. These are the routes that operate inside the city limits. We also have a fixed route, intercity. This is one route that operates between the Independence Transit Center and downtown Kansas City, Missouri. We also offer ADA and non-ADA paratransit services. This is both inside the city as well as connections between Independence and into Kansas City, Missouri. All of these services are operated Monday through Saturday. This map shows the intracity fixed routes service that the city offers. As you can see, all of the transit routes, they are highlighted in different color-coded lines. They all start out at the transit center. Our routes operate approximately 16,000 hours on an annual basis and handle about 220,000, 230,000 rides on an annual basis. This map shows the 24 route. This is the intercity route that connects KC-Mo and our transit center. The city has provided transit going all the way back to the 1970s. Those services been operated between KCATA and or First Transit. We're constantly looking for ways to fund this service. in order to have mobility for our residents. But it's not without having some funding challenges. Going back to 2008, the city was facing shortage of budgeted funds, and so they implemented a 2-hour break in the morning. So what this looked like was the routes started first thing in the morning, operated until 9 a.m., took a 2-hour break, and then operated service again, started at 11 and then wrapped up at 6 p.m. That lasted until 2012. 2012, again, the city was facing a budget challenge there, and so we partnered with First Transit. They are a third-party operator to operate all of our intracity routes. By doing so, we got more service, more hours to meet our budgeted funds. 2019, so 7 years later, transit costs keep going up. We had to eliminate a morning and an afternoon route to the Truman 16 route. We also had to look at reduce Saturday service. In that case, we rolled back the hours of Saturday service by 3 hours. We also reduced the weekday fixed route by 1 hour, so rolled that back from 7 p.m. to 6 p.m., as well as interlining the yellow and orange route. And if you go back to that map that I showed earlier, the yellow and orange route were the two routes that cover the northern third of Independence. And so what interline means is it starts as one route, and then it completes its route, and then it changes to the other route. And so essentially the turnaround time is every 2 hours.
Mr. Mayor.
In 2020, yes.
Can
Mr.
I,
Snell, please
I just
proceed.
want to clarify, 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. is not times, it's one morning route and one afternoon route.
Correct.
That were eliminated,
Yes,
thank you.
that is correct, yes. So in 2020, COVID rolls around. We eliminated the remaining Truman 16 routes that were remaining. At that time, we proposed the elimination of the intercity fixed routes. At that time, we shared with the council and the public that our cost per mile were going up a little over 10% from 2017 to 2020, whereas fare revenue, so these were the passenger fares, was decreasing by 24%. So it was creating a gap, and that gap was getting larger. This graph here shows that in a little better detail. That top line again shows that cost per mile. The red line towards the bottom shows the revenue per mile. The green line shows the federal funds that were coming into to support the transit service, and it shows that funding gap. That funding gap increased by 17% from 2017 to 2020. The funding source, the two main funding sources that the city uses to fund its transit services are its general fund and then any federal transit funds that we receive. As the city manager had mentioned at the onset of COVID, there was a large amount of federal funds that were earmarked to assist public transit so that they could keep operating. Those, for us, came to about $5.2 million. All of those had a funding expenditure deadline either in 2023 or in 2024. So when you take those graphs that I showed a little earlier and extrapolate out or plot out to 2024, you can see that the transit costs, that is that top line, is increasing significantly, When you also look at that funding gap, the gap has grown from $3.32 per mile in 2019 to $3.66 in 2023, 2024. However, when you remove the CARES funding that we received, that gap would have been $6.15. Just goes to show you the increase in costs that we have seen. So in 2022, staff put together some early projections on what we thought transit costs would be in the out years. And so you look at for FY 24, 25, you see we extrapolated out, and the general fund needed to support transit at that time, this is in 2022, was just under $2.2 million. So what we did in 2023, city worked with KCATA to conduct a service analysis. The purpose of this analysis was to find transit services that meet our budgeted amounts. This analysis developed over, it was 10 options, looked at combining routes, removing fixed route, looked at all different types of services and modes of services. Ultimately, we landed on 4 scenarios that were identified in that service analysis, and each one of those options that KCATA put together included cost estimates. And so we chose 4 options that fit within our transit budget. Would like to point out, though, that those scenarios included service reductions. All of them included a service reduction that ranged anywhere from 40% to 70%. Again, we operate about 16,000 hours there, so a 40% reduction and a 70% reduction is a fairly significant reduction in service. I'm going to just pivot just a little bit to explain what IRIS is. All of those options that KCATA looked at include IRIS as an option to fill transit gaps. It is an on-demand mobility service. It supplements existing service, and it can increase mobility across your community. It's flexible, it's user-friendly, it operates in a network of designated stops. These stops generally include existing transit stops, but it can include other locations as well. And there's a variety of different options that riders can book those trips through, whether it's through the app, over the phone, or on the Ride KC website. So KCATA assisted the city with issuing a request for proposal that was released on May 1st and closed on June 3rd. We had a pre-bid meeting where we had a great deal of interest from third-party transit operators. Unfortunately, we only had one response, and that was from First Transit, who is our current transit provider. In reviewing those, their proposal, the proposed costs were 2 to 3 times higher than what KCATA had estimated as part of that service analysis. All of the scenario costs were higher than our current cost. They ranged anywhere from a little over $2 million to $2.5 million, depending on the level of reduction. So we got that information. We're like, okay, we're not done there yet. We're going to try to look at this another way. How else can we trim costs from the transit proposal that First Transit gave us? So we met with them to discuss this issue. They've been a partner with us for 12 years. What we came to understand was their cost was as trim as it could go. Had there was no extra fat in there in which to cut, no extra cost for service or technology costs or vehicle costs or anything like that. It was solely attributable to labor costs. Similar things to what cities and other entities are experiencing now. So at that meeting, we're like, okay, how else can we look at this? If we look at economies of scale, meaning perhaps First Transit would operate not only fixed route, but also the paratransit, where they could spread those costs across those two service types. First Transit came back with cost estimates associated with both of those. Those totaled a little over $2.9 million. That was higher than we had anticipated. So what does $2.9 million just for the services that First Transit would provide? Again, and this is for, that actual 2.9 was for a 60% reduction in service. So taking that 16,000 hours a year, reducing it by 60%. And what that would mean to the general fund is we would need a little over $3.3 million in 25-26. Our budget is $1.33 million, so we're about $2 million over. So, a little discouraged, but not done yet. So we developed some transit options after seeing that fixed route may be out of our budget, but looking at how else can we provide the most vulnerable in our community with the services that they still need. So we developed 3 options. First option is the 24 route along with complementary paratransit within the 24 route. So the 24 route again goes between Independence and KC Mo, generally along the 24 highway, but also providing Iris citywide. Second option is 24 route as is, citywide paratransit as is, and supplementing with Iris. And the last option there is the 24 route and then keeping fixed route and paratransit. Both of those will be operated by First Transit, but then you need to supplement that with Iris. So going a little deeper into each one of these options, the 24 route along with complementary paratransit and citywide Iris, this is the lowest cost option. There's no change to the 24 route, so the riders of that would not see any changes. Paratransit is where you would see some changes. Complementary paratransit, again, operates within 3/4 of a mile. So think of a buffer 3/4 of a mile on either side where that 24 route operates. If your trip does not begin and end within that buffer, it would be considered a complementary paratransit trip. Rides outside of that would need to switch to Iris. So some of those ADA and non-ADA users would see a significant impact. This option also eliminates the intracity fixed route, but replaces it with Iris. These are estimated annual cost. As you can see, it fits within city budgeted amounts. The second option is the 24 route with citywide paratransit and Iris. This is the middle price option, so no change to the 24 route, no change to paratransit users. However, we would, as part of this, reinstitute the paratransit fare. That was last charged before COVID, and that is $3. This option does eliminate the intracity fixed route, but it provides it with that mobility service, IRIS, so people are no longer tethered to that fixed route, but can go from point to point. This is the estimated annual cost, and it is within budgeted amounts. There's the city does receive some state funding, which gets it within budgeted amounts. The last option is maintaining the 24 route, having First Transit provide both the fixed route service and paratransit, but also supplementing that with IRIS. This is the most expensive option. As I mentioned, it's more than 2 times the budgeted amount, but there's no change to the 24 route, no change to ADA or non-ADA, and then some of the intercity fixed route service that would need to be supplemented by switching those passengers to IRIS. And again, this is the estimated annual cost after you account for federal funds and fares. So staff's recommendation is the middle option. This is keeping the 24 route and citywide paratransit unchanged. Costs fall within budgeted amounts. The only change that paratransit users would see would be the reinstituting that $3 fare per trip for those. IRIS is a more modern and convenient service. It increases mobility over fixed route. I mentioned before about fixed route being tethered to those routes, where IRIS can go citywide. And again, it's an on-demand service. I like to use this analogy because I heard it many years ago. Some users of the fixed route have fear during the summer months of going grocery shopping for ice cream, because their ice cream is going to be melted by the time they get home. With IRIS, that would remove that from their equation. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Anyone, any questions? Please proceed.
Mr. Scannell, can you go back to your map with the colored lines with the buses?
I hope I don't make people dizzy, especially those at home.
So can you show me what disappears?
So what would disappear if we went with staff's recommendation? All of these fixed routes that you see on this map would go away. But what would replace it is an on-demand mobility service where the user schedules their pickup point and then pick up their return trip, and they are not tethered to these fixed lines that you see on this map. So you can go from, say, the Westport and Hardy area over to 291 and RD Mize in one trip.
And still have to be within the confines of Independence, so I can't take an Iris to Liberty.
Correct, yes.
Okay. And there's a fee that comes with each Iris trip?
Correct. It is
$3?
The Iris trip is $5.
Okay. Regardless of how far I go.
After 10 miles, it goes up from there, and I think it adds $1. I'd have to verify that. But if you do that extremely long trip, so more than 10 miles, it does start to add some additional cost.
So it's essentially a reduced fee Uber. Is that a fair way to think of it?
Yeah, a good way to think about it is a government subsidized Uber ride.
And are there any restrictions on who can call the Uber? So if I am badly behaved, can I be fired from Iris?
Are you talking about the driver or
No, I'm talking
or
about the client.
the client? That would be part of the user agreement, and we'd have to review that with WHC, who operates Iris. I know on our fixed route, First Transit has occasionally had a misbehaved passenger, and they've had to take steps whether to discipline them, meaning kick them off the service for a period of time, or ban them outright. Without looking at how WHC operates, I would have to get back to you on that. But I'm fairly certain that there is those safeguards there, that if you have a misbehaved passenger, that there are steps that can be taken.
Can I schedule in advance? So I have a
Yes.
doctor's appointment? Okay.
Correct, yes.
How many drivers would you have? So if you've got an awful big city like this and you have 2 drivers, you can see they could be overwhelmed pretty quickly.
So WHC, we will have all of the vehicles are marked, so passengers don't have to fear. You know, the fear with Uber and Lyft is that you don't know who's coming to pick you up. All of these vehicles will be marked as Iris. And I forgot your other question, I'm sorry.
The question was just demand. So
Yes.
say this is incredibly popular and we get 75 requests a day, you could have problems getting all those folks arranged.
WHC has looked at all of our transit ridership going back several years. Their proposal includes a total of 5 vehicles. They also, one of those vehicles is a wheelchair accessible vehicle. And after they looked at all of our ridership, the size of the area, they proposed five vehicles to serve independents.
And are there like parameters around they have to be here within 20 minutes? Or I'm just trying to figure out what is the expectation of the client?
So after they make their trip, they receive notification, hey, your trip will be there at this time. Please make your way to your point of pickup. And they wait there, they get picked up, and they get taken to make their trip.
And payment has to be made by a card? There's no cash option?
WHC is looking at cash. It will have to be exact cash. They will not make change.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Please proceed.
So you don't have to have a smartphone or computer to be able to use this service. To be able to use Iris, you can just call on the phone.
Correct.
But that makes it a little bit harder then to know exactly when it's going to arrive and that kind of thing.
It does, and but they have experienced that where Iris is currently operating in KC, Mo, and Gladstone, and other cities around us.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Please proceed.
No, I don't think I have any other questions. I was able to hear Mr. Scannell's presentation at the Audit and Finance Committee meeting and asked a number of questions there. I think I'm good.
Okay. Anyone else other questions? So you covered the part of it that they would probably have enough drivers, but if we're doing 200,000 rides a year now, that's roughly 600 rides a day. Will there still be that level of demand, or does it drop off?
So what they have experienced since they started this a couple years ago in KCMO in their pilot program is service starts out slow. Again, it's something new, it's change, but it slowly ramps up. What I like to think about this is at next week's council meeting, we will have a council item on, and it will be a 6-month contract with KCATA for our services that I outlined here today. But in that 6 months, it gives us time to evaluate this and make any necessary changes that we need to make. That's the one thing that's great about this service is that it's flexible. Cities can make changes depending on ridership, but also on different goals and needs that they see within the community. You may be able to set up free rides from a person's home to Eastgate Commerce Park. Again, this is kind of a pilot program for the next 6 months, or for 6 months beginning in January. Let us build that data. Let's see what that looks like. Let's analyze that, and let's see what direction we need to go after that.
And then how will we notify riders that, there's the change, dramatic change in service?
If the council approves that contract on October 21st, that's at the next council meeting, we will get the notification out. FTA requires that 60-day notification when you have this type of change to your transit services. And then they will work to get people signed up for this, riders and users signed up for this, so that hopefully after January 1, there's as little hiccups as possible.
And just as a point of, if Mr. Scannell, I don't know if you'll know the answer to this, or Mr. City Manager, I kind of know it because I've talked to other mayors, but other cities are almost completely dropping their transit service.
That is correct. There's been a number over the last couple years. In fact, this year, KCK is looking to make it was over $2.2 million cut to their transit service. These costs keep going up. We need to look at innovative ways like Iris to meet the mobility demands for our citizens.
Yeah. And I know I don't want to call them out, other suburban cities they just said, we just can't afford this. And which begs the question for us as as cities, as county, in some cities they have a county tax that pays for it, so you have it, provided that way. That's one of the problems with Kansas City ATA, or not one of the problems, one of the challenges for them to operate is they don't have any other revenue sources unless they get it from the cities or they, charge ridership. And to put, during COVID, they took the metering systems out of their buses to put them back in. It's like $30,000 per bus to put it back in. So now you're in a scenario where, how do you cover the cost of putting those back in? Will riders do it? And then will there be enough revenue from that to make it work? And, still with that option, a lot of cities said no. So I think, Mr. City Manager, I know you and I talked about this. We're, as a city, we're making a commitment to continue the service where a lot of cities have dropped it in the metro. So I don't know if you want to weigh in on this and give me your thoughts.
Yeah, so I will say, this has been a challenge for several years that we've tried to navigate. And as I said in my opening remarks, we're successful in bridging a gap for several years because of the federal funds that were not anticipated. But we're at a point now where there are no more magic bullets with this. We recognize as staff that public transit is an essential service for many people in our community. It's not a luxury or a fun thing to do. It's their lifeline to the outside world, to medical appointments, in some cases to employment, and to the grocery store, et cetera. So we have worked to come up with a solution that still provides that connectivity for those who are in most need of it. As you say, and I don't say this in any sort of arrogant way, but whereas most of the peer cities have made the decision to outright drop public transit services, we've looked for a solution that still provides it. So as we've worked through this, my thinking on this has evolved. Instead of what we're losing, the adaptive way that we're still going to provide public transit services in a way that's affordable for the city, but also in a way that still provides reliable and convenient services for those who rely upon this for their connections to the community.
Thank you very much. Any closing thoughts, Mr. Scannell?
None, nope.
Yeah, it's just a challenging situation, challenging decision, but I know all of our colleagues in the metro area are struggling with this too, so we're not alone in that regard. Okay, anything else? Okay, with that, we'll now go to the next item on the agenda is the Adventure Oasis recommendations. So, Mr. City Manager, would you like to kind of frame this one for us?
Be happy to. About a year ago, city staff made a presentation at the Audit and Finance Committee regarding the costs of operating our municipal water park, Adventure Oasis. At that time, the members of the Audit and Finance Committee provided direction to city staff to proceed with another year of operating the service, but to report back in a year to see if there had been a change in consumer behavior relative to attendance and the subsidy that the city provides to operate the water park. City staff gave that consideration its full weight, and we are here tonight to provide an update on what it looks like to operate our water park from a financial perspective, along with a recommendation that we think is in the best interest of the community. So with that, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism, Morris Heidi, is here to provide that overview.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Yes, this evening I'd like to share some information about Adventure Oasis Water Park, really a follow-up, as City Manager Walker mentioned, from a year ago. To do so, I'd like to share a few discussion points, cover some information, so a little background information in case you're not aware of kind of how we got to where we are with Adventure Oasis, discuss a little bit about income and expenditures, share some operational cost increases that we've experienced that have kind of driven us to the point we're at today, talk about our capital needs, attendance. As you recall, we opened it up this year to non-residents, so to see whether that made any difference or not. The follow-up items that City Manager Walker mentioned from 2023, and then just looking at the financial viability for Adventure Oasis, and then finally, ultimately, some recommendations. So Adventure Oasis opened 19 years ago, 2005. It's always been managed by a third-party contractor. City staff have never operated the day-to-day operations, so hiring the lifeguards, scheduling the concession stand workers, et cetera. That's always been by a third-party vendor. The capacity for our patrons at the water park is about 1,600. This fourth bullet point to me is very significant. There's been no new water feature added since opening in 2005. So since 2019, basically the water park has been the way it is today. Certainly we've made maintenance improvements, fixed things, done things like that, but nothing substantial, no substantial investment has taken place in 19 years. And I mention that because in the 2010 Parks Master Plan, it specifically called for a new water park attractions, plural, every 5 to 10 years to keep the water park viable. And unfortunately, that has not happened. So to date, we should have at least 3 or 4, if not more, new attractions, new features at the water park, but that has not taken place, unfortunately. During COVID in 2020, the water park was obviously closed. That affected not only the fiscal year 20, but also 21, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. And again, following the recommendations from the Audit and Finance Committee, I'm jumping ahead. Residents-only policy was implemented in a portion of the 21 season and all of the 2022 and 2023 season. If we recall, after post-COVID, a lot of facilities had substantial investment that needed to be made. They'd sat vacant for a year or two. And so in the area, we were one of a very few water parks that actually opened back up post-COVID. And so we saw a big surge in participation, really was more capacity than we could handle. So that was deemed an approach to kind of handle that interest in the water park. And then finally, following the recommendations from a year ago, we dropped the residency requirement following those recommendations. So talking a little bit about income and expenditures, listed out the last several years going back to fiscal year 2019. This lists out the revenues for the water park, some of our staff salaries and benefits to kind of oversee and manage the contract, the contractor's fees and the management fees associated with that. So you kind of see all those expenditures there. And then I really would like you to key in on that far right column, that net income or loss statement. And as you can see, every one of those years is unfortunately a loss. If you look at FY23, $680,000. So that's about almost $57,000 a week that we were losing at that point. The last row there, FY25, again, this for fiscal year 25, and it's sometimes challenging when we think of the water park. It's really a summer season, but it spans two fiscal years. So FY25, the last row there, that's only 7 weeks. That's July, 4 weeks, 4.5 weeks in July, and 3 weeks in August, so 7 weeks total. So we lost almost $313,000, so almost $45,000 a week. As a reminder as well, the 2010 Parks Master Plan recommended a cost recovery target of 100%. So all revenues covering expenses. Unfortunately, I don't think the water park we don't have, or at least I don't have available good records back to 2005, but I don't believe even at the onset that it had 100% cost recovery, unfortunately. So share a little bit about some of those operational costs that we have seen increases on. A big one is staffing. Since last couple of years, many businesses post-COVID, just the staffing challenges that many businesses have faced. Our third-party contractor experienced those same staffing challenges. The decision was made a couple of years ago to increase our lifeguard pay to fill some of those vacancies. In other words, we're trying to compete with other companies for those lifeguards and concession stand workers. Unfortunately, the fiscal impact of that cost us almost $260,000, again, over a couple fiscal years. We also added in a training reimbursement for lifeguards, so if they would stay the entire season, we would pay for that lifeguard training. For many young teenagers, it's a challenge to fork out that amount of cash up front, so that added a little bit of increase in costs as well. Really, the third challenge there is the increase in the Missouri minimum wage. So from 2015 to 2024, a 61% increase in the Missouri minimum wage. So 2015 minimum wage was $7.65. Currently, it's $12.30. I'm sure many are aware Proposition A is on the November ballot, would further increase the minimum wage, and if that were to pass, would improve the minimum wage to $15 an hour. So almost doubling in 10 years from 2015 to 2025 if that were to pass. So again, these are just costs that we have to account for as far as the overall operation of the water park. Continuing with some other additional operational costs, so maintenance is always a challenge when you're dealing with pumps and motors and the chemicals and all of the things associated with aquatics. There's a lot of costs associated there, so pump room repairs, just the physical, the slides and the different water features, and then just supplies, the chemicals, the chlorine, the different items that we have to replace, the wear and tear items that just eventually have to be replaced, so additional costs. Wanted to point out as well, as we have talked about the proposed general obligation bond, I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of this. So of the proposed $250 million general obligation bond, there is no capital currently in that list that would include any capital investment in Adventure Oasis Water Park. The current list as it stands would be $75 million for a new community center or recreation center. We anticipate that would include a year-round aquatics. And the reason I say that is this last summer, our consultant did a survey of our citizens. And of the most important spaces, in other words, filling out that survey, what is most important to you as a resident? Of the most important spaces listed on the survey, number 2, 3, 5, and 10, all related to indoor aquatics. And the most important program was indoor aquatics. That was the number one most important program that was listed on that survey. So that all being said, again, that's not included in that general obligation conversation that's been going on for some time. The challenge is, the last bullet point there, we have $8.4 million in identified capital needs that really needs to be spent to keep Adventure Oasis current and relevant and make it operational. And I'll talk about what those costs include here. So we divided those into three priorities. The first priority is really life, health, safety issues, code requirements. Again, unfortunately, just the way things have gone, some of the improvements have been deferred over the years, and those have all kind of the perfect storm has hit at this point. So we're at a point where if we were to open in May of 2025, we would be looking at almost $1.3 million of needed capital investment into the facility. In other words, just to make it where it's operational and safe for our patrons. Priority 2 and 3 are really related to visitor experience or visitor enhancements. It's challenging when we have newer water parks in the area that are obviously interesting and exciting for our residents and other residents to go to, whereas residents may have been coming to Independence over the years. Now there's other opportunities, other options in the metro area. So in other words, to stay relevant, to stay where folks would want to come and visit the water park, we would be looking at another almost $7 million for a grand total of $8.4 million. One of the challenges, back to that life safety, just the priority 1 issues, example here, 8 motors that drive the pumps is almost $175,000. So we're talking about large capital items, large capital investment that needs to take place in order to open this spring. Switching gears a little bit, kind of share some information on attendance. So this is going back to 2018. Earlier slides talked about the fiscal year. This is, again, more of the summer season, so season 2018, the summer season through 2024. If you'll notice, prior to COVID, you can see those, see those large numbers in attendance, almost 66,000 attendees, patrons, 61,000, 2018, 2019. A lot of season pass holders, 5,200, et cetera. We've never, ever recovered post-COVID, and that's really been a challenge for us. The year immediately after COVID in 2021, almost 39,000. But even the last 2 years, 2023, again, that was only residents of Independence, so just under 45,000. But even opening up to non-residents this last summer, we only saw a slight increase to 45, almost 46,000. So no real substantial increase in attendance at Adventure Oasis. So looking back about just almost exactly a year ago, there was a study session where Adventure Oasis was talked about. One suggestion was to hand out some free vouchers, free passes that might get folks to come to the water park. And city staff was asked to provide some recommendations on that initiative, and also to provide information to the Park Commission, ask for their recommendation about the situation with Adventure Oasis, and also to take this deeper look into the financial viability of Adventure Oasis. So we were tasked with 3 follow-up items. So a couple weeks later, we did meet with the Park Commission. The Park Commission, after we presented the information, they were supportive of opening up Adventure Oasis to non-residents for this last summer season. They also, they also recommended that at that time we were looking at updating the 2010 Parks and Recreation Master Plan in 2024. They were interested to see what the consultant would recommend out of that master plan. As you know, we ultimately decided to postpone that update with a lot of the other initiatives that we were working on at the time. And then lastly, since Adventure Oasis was already operating at a significant loss, if you remember that previous slide, they did not recommend proceeding with free passes or vouchers. We then followed that up with a presentation to the Audit and Finance Committee in November of last year, and the feedback from the Audit and Finance Committee was to go one final season, which would have been this summer season, summer 24, to allow time to plan for a replacement asset. That was kind of the gist of the recommendation. So based on the Audit and Finance Committee's recommendation, we only budgeted for the summer season. And in the current fiscal year, there were only funds to run through August, basically, of this year. You have on the screen there, we've listed out some of the costs associated if we were, in fact, to open up in next spring. The challenge with that is really planning starts now. Costs are incurred now to get staff hired, get staff trained, make the repairs, as I mentioned. That almost 1.3 million is listed there. So operating capital total of about 1.4 million that we would have to identify that is currently not in the PRT budget. So a couple options we could obviously look at. One would be identifying new funding source. Obviously that's always challenging, but that could be a potential opportunity. We could utilize fund balance, but this, I want to make sure everyone realizes this is a very temporary stopgap measure. We would basically that would buy us 1 year. And then year 2, we would be below the 16% fund balance recommendation. And lastly, the third option would be to eliminate or drastically reduce other programs that we currently fund in order to fund Adventure Oasis. That would be the last option. So once again, we've kind of come to a crossroads, in my opinion. This idea, as our city manager has talked about on numerous occasions, do we focus on quality or do we focus on the quantity? Quality of the experience or the quantity of the assets that we continue to invest in, to maintain as our city assets. So after doing all the analysis, looking at all the information, it is our recommendation, staff's recommendation, that due to the continued financial losses, the unfunded deferred capital investment that's needed, again, 8.4 million, the management contract for the third-party vendor actually expires this December, so December of 2024, and also the limited impact of operating for 12 weeks per year. So out of the entire year, this is really only 12 weeks during the summertime. Our recommendation is to not open Adventure Oasis Water Park next spring, summer. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Please proceed.
So right now, we're subsidizing every single visit, basically $13.50 per visit. So they pay whatever they pay for their entrance fee, but then the rest of the citizens are also paying $13.50 for every person who comes to visit. And looking at the capital investment, let's assume that we don't get more people. Now, if you upgrade, you're likely to increase your attendance, but let's just say it stays at 45,000 visits. At that point, that means that the city is subsidizing in $187 per visit just to cover the capital needs. I know the 3,000 people who have passes are going to be sorely disappointed because they obviously come regularly and it's a big part of their summer fun. So that's a hard decision to make, but excuse me, the finances of it are difficult. Do you have any idea what the cost would be to decommission the park?
No, I do not. We felt like the first step was to get some direction, and then obviously we'd have to, make some decisions about where to go from at that point. But at this point, we haven't explored any of our options. So, and I would agree with you. The challenges of the 123,000 residents. This is such a small representation. And looking at all of our programs, all of our events, all the things we try to promote and fund, obviously many of those are subsidized to a certain degree. Many of our programs are free, but this is very costly in the grand scheme of all of the things that we do and operate. So don't want to minimize at all any of those who have been our diehard customers, season pass holders for many years. Certainly have appreciated their support, but at the end of the day, it's a pretty challenging financial situation.
So assume that we decide we aren't going to use our savings to continue to subsidize Adventure Oasis. How would we notify our clientele that it wouldn't be open for the following season?
Oh, I think we'd use all of our social media contacts, the website, our communications team. We would be able to get the word out in time. Typically in December, we run a sale on our season passes, so that, that would not be happening. So I think folks would have ample, heads up on the decision that has been made.
And we have contact information for our pass holders?
We should have, yes.
Okay.
Yep. Mhm. Yeah,
Very good.
the daily entry folks, we don't
Sure.
track their information, but yes, for season pass holders, correct.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Other further
Mr. Mayor.
discussions? Please proceed.
What is our entrance fees that we charge compared to the other like parks in the area?
So we charge, last year we charged $9, and this year this summer we upped that to $10 for residents, $15 for non-residents. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but we're fairly comparable to other venues in the area. We typically look at that at each year before we submit the schedule of fees, so.
Okay, thank you. Just a comment, I don't think we can continue running this at a loss. We definitely can't do that, and especially with, Grain Valley has an aquatic park now, and I think Blue Springs just opened one up, so I think this is definitely, I don't know, we just can't continue doing this, and that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Other further discussions? Questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Please proceed.
I was part of the Audit and Finance Committee that made the recommendation last year to do this, to open again this year, in hopes that some things would improve. Obviously, things went at least the other way, if
They
not.
did. They went east.
And given the scope of the capital projects, I don't see where we have much choice other than to not open it. That's just my perspective. I wish it was different than that. I know that a lot of folks do get a lot of enjoyment out of that, but I just don't see any way to subsidize it at the level that Councilmember McCandless just mentioned. And so, I would be interested to know what the plans for decommissioning or, I'd like to think there would be some market for some of the equipment there or something, but I kind of like to know what the plans would be going forward, in the long run, to see what we would do with that space. I mean, if nothing else, we have to mow it, we have to mow around
Correct.
and maintain things, and, I'm put it up for sale, but who wants to buy a water park, right? And so, I'm not sure what the options are, but I certainly would be interested to know what that might be.
Anything? Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to our last item, Mr. City Manager, the state legislative agenda. So anything to frame this up?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just very quickly, as John Mayfield makes his way up here, city's longtime practice has been to develop a legislative agenda that can help guide our local legislative delegation, the city's lobbying team, and other stakeholders about the city's policies and positions on key issues in the upcoming legislative session. As you know, Mayor, these issues evolve rapidly in Jefferson City, particularly towards the end of session, so it's good for the city to be on the record about how we feel on these issues, as late nights and long hours can, sometimes make it where it's difficult to get in touch with one another. So tonight, Mr. Mayfield is here to present some of the recommended legislative priorities that we see for 2025. Make sure the council feels like we've captured your priorities appropriately. And then this is scheduled, as Mr. Mayfield will let you know, to be on a council agenda for an upcoming resolution. So with that, Mr. Mayfield.
Thanks, Mr. City Manager. Mayor Rowland, members of the council, good evening. John Mayfield, City Manager's office. About 2 months after the last legislative session ends, I get together with department directors and we discuss issues, concerns, things through their networks that they hear that they're concerned about. We begin to draft the legislative agenda for the next year. And then after we do that, I submit to the city manager for his perusal, his suggestions and comments, and he and his office provide those to me. And then we make further changes in the document, and then we also share them with our lobbying team, John Barget and Associates. So by the time it gets to you, we feel like it's been fairly well vetted for the upcoming year. And as the city manager said, it's our intention to have a document in front of you at one of your November council meetings for your approval. Pre-filing starts December 1st in Jefferson City on bills for the 2025 legislative session, which I know it seems like the year just started, and here we are talking about December and 2025 already. I don't know where the year went. But bills that are pre-filed generally have a better path to success than bills that are filed once the session starts, because the hecticness and the gamesmanship and everything else starts and things get lost in the shuffle. Then the budget comes along, and usually there's a lot of feet dragging. It usually comes along when the budget usually comes along because then there's a deadline. At some point they have to pass a budget. So bills that get pre-filed have a better chance of success. As you know, 2024 is an election year. I'm sure a lot of folks at home are enjoying the TV commercials and items in their mailboxes as much as I am and my family is. I'm going to give you kind of the Steve Kornacki view of Jefferson City for 2025. We're going to have a new governor, we're going to have a new lieutenant governor, and we're going to have a new secretary of state due to term limits and the current lieutenant governor running for governor. The treasurer and attorney general were appointed by the governor, so they're the incumbents, but they're running for election for the first time to those positions. All the members of the Missouri House will be up for election, and the odd-numbered Senate districts will be up this year. So we believe there's going to be at least 10 new state senators next year and at least 52 new members of the House, so basically 1/3 of Jefferson City will be brand new. Now, some members of the House may go over to the Senate, or there may be some cases some senators come back and join the House at a later date and time. Most political observers think that there's really only about 3 or 4 competitive state Senate districts races and about 15 House races. So that's kind of my Steve Kornacki whiteboard of Jefferson City for you. I don't have my khakis on, but I hope you enjoyed that. One last thing, our state senator for the last 8 years, John Rizzo, has left office due to term limits. His term is going to expire at the end of the year. Now he's the executive director of the Jackson County Sports Authority. He was a tremendous partner and ally for the City of Independence. His experience in the House and the Senate and just his family knowledge of Jefferson City made him a very valuable asset. He was seen as an honest broker on both sides, which is kind of rare these days in Jefferson City. So he was tremendous for us. One thing I do want to mention very briefly, it's not really being talked about a lot, but if the election goes a certain way, and I'm not predicting anything, but if the election were to go a certain way and the two political parties in Jefferson City were to put certain people in certain positions, it's very possible that someone from the Kansas City region could be the Speaker of the House and the minority floor leader. And I know the mayor and I will tell you that's about as rare as Haley's Comet, having one person from Kansas City in leadership position, let alone 2, especially in the House at the same time. So that could be something that would be impactful for our region if it were to occur. Not hearing a lot about it because there's some things that could happen between now and then, but just to let you know what's going on in Jefferson City. Our top 4 legislative priorities for the upcoming session are opposing any changes to economic development tools such as community improvement districts, the CID. There's a lot of crazy thoughts out there about elections. As you know, elections are expensive. A citywide election can cost roughly $200,000. There's another school of thought that it has to be a unanimous vote of the governing body. So we just basically want Jefferson to let us have what we have. Don't mess with it. Just let us have what we have. It seems to be working just fine. Our community has a fond and historic tradition of speaking their mind. Trust me, if they didn't like it, they would let us know. Secondly, we would oppose any changes in the sales tax rate. And I know that when Chris came in June and kind of talked about working against a bill that did away with the state sales or the sales tax on food, it brought a lot of consternation to folks, and I can understand that. Some people, it's a challenging environment for folks. We all go to the grocery store. We kind of understand where things are, but I wanted to just to kind of lift the hood of the car a little bit and let you know that, and you may have seen these numbers from earlier this year. These are from 2023 because when this legislation was filed, it was earlier this year. But we would take about a $4.2 million hit to our general fund if we eliminated the sales tax on food. Now, it's not counting the roughly $550,000 the police capital fund would lose. We would lose about $2 million in our fire protection fund. Stormwater and parks would lose a little over $1 million each. And you've kind of heard earlier tonight some challenges and difficult decisions you're going to have to face. And so that's why we are very protective of the sales tax rate and why we're on defense a lot in Jefferson City, because there's a lot of angst about cities and what they're doing in Jefferson City. And sometimes I think there's folks in certain positions that have not really had to run a city before or a county, and so they don't really understand all of the challenges that come with that. We oppose any legislation that takes away the right for cities to manage rights of way. That comes up here and there, like with cable franchise fees and other bills. And so we just feel like we're the closest to the situation. We understand our community and we know our needs better than anyone in Jefferson City. We just want to be allowed to manage what we have. And finally, we want to support increased funding for mental health services, including funding for the Missouri 988 program. You might have noticed last week in the Examiner there was a story about mental health and about suicide and the Missouri 988 program. It's a fairly new program. It's a national program, but yet it's kind of run by the states. And you might remember for the community health assessment, suicide is a big issue in this community, in this part of the world. In the article in the Examiner, I believe it stated that 61% of Americans had either known someone who had thought about, contemplated, or had died from suicide. So this is a crisis hotline for people contemplating suicide, having a mental health crisis. And a bigger picture, it's hoped to kind of take some of the heat off 911 and some first responders, because you're getting hooked up directly with a mental health professional. In 2022, when this program started, the response time, it took 47 seconds to answer the telephone, and now it's down, I believe, to 22 seconds to answer a call. So that's a big improvement. But the federal enabling legislation kind of tied it to each state kind of coming up with its own funding for the program, basically through a fee on a cell phone, kind of similar to 911. So we would like to see the state of Missouri, they only passed 28 bills this last year outside the budget, so they weren't really particularly busy. So we would like for them to consider strongly increasing the funding for the Missouri 988 program and other mental health services in the state of Missouri. I think that's the highlights of what we're looking at in 2025, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One thing that's not on there we ought to at least give a little thought to is supportive daycare subsidies. Child care subsidies have been an item of discussion at Jeff City now for several years. It's the #1 item on the Missouri Chamber's agenda, and I know that the Lieutenant Governor, who may well end up being our governor, that's one of his high priorities, is to address this. It's a very important issue for people being able to be employed, perhaps also a bus service, but we can't talk about that anymore. But I'd love for us to at least consider whether offering our support, we wouldn't be a primary lobbyist for it, but it's a way to offer support for the people who are working on this important issue. Thank you.
Sure, Councilmember McCandless. I would just say, when we craft this, sometimes it's, as you mentioned, sometimes it's good for us to be out in front. Other times it's good for us to be in a supportive role and knowing which one is which. And just based on how Jefferson City is, didn't necessarily list that. I know that's a priority for Missouri Municipal League. I know they're coming to town for Westgate next week. I'm more than happy to discuss that with them and kind of see what their plans are and see if we can find a role in that, if that would be conducive to the council and the city manager.
Anyone else, other thoughts or comments? I've got a number of thoughts, and I want to see how we proceed with this and how my colleagues would like to view it. I know the city of, and city manager, Mr. City Manager, to correct me on this, I believe the city of Green Valley got state money for their interchange, to improve their interchange. I don't know if it was Green Valley. It was someone along the I-70 corridor. And so I think it'd be appropriate for us to ask for money for the improvement for Nolan Road, considering the fact that Wally's is considering there, and why not get money from the state if we can for that. So that's just one of the items that I would like to see put on the list. And, you know, do I need to make an amendment to the resolution in order to add that, or how could we get that added?
If it's okay with the city manager and with the council, I could update our document and send it to you and the city manager for approval if that meets with everybody in the room.
Yeah, you know, I can put it on as amendment, and that way everybody can vote on it individually, because you may already have your
What I
document.
present tonight is just a tentative document. It's not, it isn't really the final full document. It's kind of meant to be tentative.
Right.
So we can update it and have that on the agenda, and I can also distribute that part of the council meeting. I'll get together with Chris and kind of Ropey and kind of figure out how Green Valley did that and make sure we have the right wording for you.
Yep, that would be great. I know I'm going to, I hope, Chief Dustman, I hope I'm going to make you happy with my request on this one. I know you and I are on the same hymnal, same page in this regard, and that is the Senate Bill 5, and there's another bill that's also
572.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Cover is ready for that one on the agenda, because I know it's an irritant to all of us in city government, and I would love to put those on there, to have those as agenda items also, to see if we can get that reversed, get that overturned, and see how we can get that done. I think that's just a really important priority for us as a city, for the amount of impact that it makes for us.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I've been in discussions the last several weeks with Chris Ropey about that. We do have a strategy for that. It is in the document. I didn't list it as a priority kind of for a strategic reason. We do have a plan in place. I have spoken with the city manager and the police chief about it. Kind of why we did, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's good for us to be out front. Sometimes it's kind of better for us to be supportive, but I'd be happy to share more with that with you. But we do have a strategy in place, and that's kind of, I've been working on it for 7 years. It's a priority for me, Mr. Mayor.
Well, and it's one of those things that there's, in the past, it's been 2 or 3 senators who have been the bottleneck on that thing, and they've been able to hold it up. Mm-hmm. And so I realize it's a big ask and a heavy lift, but to me, it just makes sense. Mm-hmm. And the discussion at the Missouri Municipal League with the other mayors down there was, there was a lot of interest to reverse that and to mm-hmm. and to let all of their, you know, if the mayors and the city councils around the state contact their legislators and say this needs to be reversed, then all of a sudden we've got pretty good momentum to get it changed. So I think that's an important key. And the last one I think this is important for us as a council is money for the unhoused. There's no way that a city can on its own deal with this issue. We have got to start making this a federal issue and a state issue to say, where do we get funding to mm-hmm. help folks who find themselves in these circumstances? One of the big reasons this crisis has occurred is prior to the, and this is background, and you can stop if you like, but with the financial crisis of 2007, 2009, mm-hmm. prior to that moment in history, we were building about 2 million homes a year. With that financial crisis, one of the things that we lost was all of those home builders that, in fact, went out of business. Since then, we've been building on the average of about $600,000 or 600,000 homes a year. That's about 1.4 shortage. As that number continues to increase over time, we continue to get further and further behind on housing, and that's one of the factors that's making an impact. And it's also making an impact on the prices of homes for individuals. So I think that's just an important key for states and the federal government to get involved with that and say, how do we get money for the house? And I know it's an incredibly complex issue, but I just think that's one of the things for us to discuss. Anyway,
I certainly agree with you, Mr. Mayor. I know the Missouri Municipal League, I believe it's point A25 in their document. They talk a lot about the federal government being involved, the state being involved. I think that they would be, in this instance, probably a better driver of the vehicle, although I do believe that having Congressman Cleaver, who's either going to be the ranking member or the chairman of this House Subcommittee on Housing and Insurance, is also a very valuable asset to us. I think we need to use all of the tools that we have. Westgate meeting is going to be next week. It's something I think we can definitely talk to Missouri Municipal League about and kind of see what they see the landscape of that being, and kind of maybe decide at that point if we need to be in the front seat or more in the back seat on that one. But it's, as you mentioned, it's very complicated. There's lots of layers.
But if my colleagues agree with those being added, I'd love to see those added to the list. Particularly Senate Bill 5, it's just such an important issue for us as cities. Any other comments or questions? Well, with that being said, Mr. City Manager, anything that you would like to close on for this evening?
No, we appreciate the council's time and direction given, and thank you again.
And I just want to say one thing, if I may. It was absolutely fantastic tonight not to hear anyone say, I'm sorry you can't read this. I thought the slides were great. They were easy to read. So I can't say well done enough, because I know the folks at home, when they're big and they can see them, then they can read them, and I just think that's a big one. So I just can't say well done enough on that. So thank you very much. With that, we'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.